Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jay Linder, and it's October 9th, and we are here for another episode of the COPEC Financial Wellness Daily Livestream discussion. And today our discussion is going to be with Russ Golowin, who's an elder law attorney with Golowin Legal Services. And we're going to be talking about land trusts today. For those of you that might have some interest in protecting your property, a little bit of privacy and things of that nature. So looking forward to having a really good discussion. I always enjoy our discussions with Russ. And so today from 2 to 2:30, we're going to have that discussion. And then from 2:30 to 3, for those of you that might have additional questions, we can go ahead and do that from that time. Or we can try to get them in our conversation through the first half hour. So making sure we get some disclosure out there. COPEC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we've got some information there about not only COPEC, our speakers, our board, but also the affiliated companies like mine and others on the board. We want to make sure that disclosure is out there. We are not... this doesn't affect what COPEC does as a 501c3, but because of common leadership, we want to make sure that that information is out there as affiliated companies. And I not only host, but I'm president of COPEC, so you can see retirement strategies disclosure on there as well. So you can also see this on the COPEC website on www. We have Russ Golowin. We're going to talk about land trusts. And Russ, if you would be willing to join us. And so land trust, this is something that, maybe if somebody is dealing with property, whether they have privacy issues or whether they have, companies or buildings or rental income or whatever it is that they may have, they may already know about this, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I would say that most people aren't aware of land trusts. They're not extremely common documents or procedures to have in place, but there is a place and time for them. What those might be are, number one, landlords, people that own property and rent it out. It could be somebody like a physician who wants to keep the ownership of their house private. They might not want it just to be simple for people to find out where they live. Or they might be worried about people trying to snoop around, make a guess of how much money they own, and maybe sue them for something that maybe it's just a nuisance. Maybe there's no weight behind it at all. Or, there are some people that just are private. They don't really want people to know where they live for whatever reason. Those are 3 examples why you might want to keep ownership of your property or properties out of the public record and kind of create a mask over one of your oftentimes most valuable assets, which is your house or some rentals you might own. That's where this land trust comes in. It's a legal document, just like any other trust, that can help provide this type of privacy.
So last week, we talked a little bit about LLCs, right?
Right.
We talked about the idea that if you have a rental property, you'd want to put it in an LLC to provide that extra layer of protection. So an LLC could add that protection, but a land trust is a little different than an LLC in what way?
Yeah, good question, Jay. An LLC or a corporation is created to provide asset protection. And what I mean by that is, if I own a rental property in an LLC and there's a lawsuit based on some injury that occurred at that rental that's owned by the LLC, that means that that liability is contained in that LLC bubble and my personal assets aren't at risk. Only the LLC assets, which is that property, is at risk. And that's a very important thing to do if you have rentals or other property. So you should still keep that in mind. But a land trust is a little bit different. It doesn't provide strong asset protection like an LLC does. What it does is it just tries to keep your name out of the public record as owning that piece of property. So in one way, it provides a little bit of asset protection in the way that if I'm looking around, maybe I'm an attorney and I'm trying to search for property that someone owns because my client has alleged that you've damaged them in some way. And I'm trying to determine whether it makes sense to file a lawsuit. Well, if I look on the auditor and I type in, somebody's name and it shows that they own 5 different properties, I might think that that's worthy of filing a lawsuit because there's probably some assets there. And I can actually check and see if there's a mortgage on the property or not, and probably do an elementary calculation of how much money is still owed on that mortgage. But if instead I search for that person's name and nothing comes up, I might think, well, man, I don't even know if I want to move forward with this lawsuit because I don't know if there's going to be anything to collect. So in a way, that provides a little bit of asset protection because I can't find out how much property you own. But a land trust is to keep things private. An LLC is to actually provide creditor protection. So they might work together. You might have both, but they are separate in what they're trying to accomplish.
In general, an LLC, would you have, say that again. So would you, if you have something already in an LLC, would you also need to apply a land trust to it somehow?
You might, and actually it's kind of jumping ahead as far as how I think about this in my mind, but I will say, if this is something that interests you and you really want to have as much privacy as possible, you want to create your land trust and you want to create your LLC before you ever buy this property that we're talking about. Because once I buy a piece of real estate, my name is forever in the public record as having owned it. Even if it's only for a day, if I look back in the chain of title, I can see that Russ Golowin owned this house. Okay, and then it was transferred to an LLC, and then it was transferred to a trust or something like that. I can make an educated guess that Russ probably or may still have some sort of ownership attached to that. And so that kind of blows the protection that we're trying to get. We're trying to make it so if somebody looks up my name, they can't find anything, at least easily, that ties me to that property. So the best way to do it, of course, if you can't do it the best way, there's still pretty good ways, right? But the best way would be to create your trust, create the LLC, and then the trust will be the purchaser of that real estate from the beginning. So my name is not attached to the trust because I'm not the trustee. The trustee would be the one purchasing it. And then on the corporate documents, the LLC, I would want to make sure that I have someone else like an attorney or a friend that doesn't have the same last name as me be the registered agent on that LLC. And so then even if they looked up the documents with the Secretary of State, my name is not on those documents. So the tough thing is, well, I'll say not the tough thing, but first of all, if you have property in a land trust, most people aren't savvy enough to find out that you own it, even if you already owned that property. If you get somebody that knows a little bit more about public records or an attorney, they'll be able to find it. So, again, it's not all for naught if you've already purchased that piece of property, but probably a knowledgeable person could dig far enough to find your interest. I was able to do that with a property near where I live, and I was able to find out that a pretty famous hockey star owned the house, even though there was an LLC and some other trusts, just because it wasn't done exactly right for whatever reason, I don't think it was an error by that person or the attorney, but it didn't work out quite the way they wanted. But I would be shocked if just the average person could find out who owned that particular house.
Right. And back to the example of an LLC, and there's definitely some moving parts here, and it's very intriguing. If you have an LLC and you are one of the owners of the LLC, does the land trust own that ownership of the LLC, or is the LLC the owner of the land trust?
Usually, I mean, there are all different ways of doing things, of course, but usually the property would be owned by this trust, but the LLC would be the beneficiary of the interest in the trust. So normally, if I create a trust, I'm the trustee and I'm the beneficiary being the one that can enjoy the value of the money that's in the trust.
Right.
But in this case, the beneficiary would be the LLC. And the reason for that is you might have several different land trusts owning different properties, but then basically the beneficial ownership of those trusts is owned by this LLC. And that way, if there's a liability on this one property that's owned in trust, that liability can't get into my LLC. And if I'm operating some business in that LLC, if there's a liability in there, it can't get out to the other properties. So again, there are different ways of doing it, but that's one way of doing it.
For most people, though, that might be listening to this really kind of goes to either their, again, we talk about the LLC owning rental properties, but let's talk about this residential idea where you wouldn't have an LLC, right? We are used to the idea that we would own the property ourselves, or we're always told joint with right of survivorship with a spouse. So can you apply this concept to from the majority of us that might own a home, whether we have a mortgage on it or not? Let's just say the mortgage is paid off. Let's put that on the side.
Right. So yeah, for a personal residence, you might not mess around with an LLC. I think that it might be rare for someone to do that. But you might just say, you know what, I just want to make it so if people type my name into the auditor's website, nothing comes up as far as a current owner of the property. You could use a land trust for that. You'd just be making a deed to this land trust. You could be the trustee in that example. Well, actually, you wouldn't want to be the trustee. You'd still name someone else to do that, like an attorney or a trust company, or again, a friend that doesn't have the same last name as you. You wouldn't want it to be a spouse or a child. That's too close to you, right? But if I named, for example, you, Jay, as the trustee of my land trust, that would mean the property shows up as you owning it in the public record. But I still have full control. I have the ability to live there, to receive if I rented it, any rents from it. I direct whether it's sold or not. So I don't really lose any control. It's just nobody can see that Russ Golowin owned that property. That would be the benefit of it in a private residence type of situation where you're not trying to get big asset protection. You just want it to be private as far as who owns your home on a simple public record search.
Doesn't the trustee have authority over some of those decisions?
Well, yeah, the trustee is the one, for example, if the house was to be sold, they would have to sign the papers to sell it. But the trustee must act in the best interest of the beneficiary, which in this case is going to be the original property owner. And so they would have full control over what the trustee does in this particular type of trust.
So they have the authority to fire the trustee, or the trustee just has to act in the best interest, which comes out in a lawsuit somewhere, or because that what I'm hearing there is that for the benefit in a land trust, for the benefit of that privacy, you're kind of putting an arm's length ownership to the trustee of this land trust, right?
Mhm.
And so that trustee, there is a little bit of a disconnect there as far as, well, I own it, but the trust owns it. But I own it, but the trust owns it, but there's now a trustee. They actually make the decisions, but they really don't. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there for, I think, a lot of the lay people out there.
Right. Again, you have to have legal title on the deed. If Jay was the trustee, it would say Jay Lindner, trustee of the such and such land trust, like the 1234 Smith Street Land Trust. So there is a legal title in the name of that trust as managed by the trustee, but you could retain the right to fire the trustee and replace them. So of course, if anything isn't going the way you want, you can just terminate that trustee, replace them with somebody that will do what you want. So there is that. And then, the law states that in all trusts, a trustee must act in the best interest of the beneficiary or beneficiaries. So if Jay were to do something that isn't in my best interest, I don't know what that would be. I guess sell the property and then transfer the money to himself. Well, of course, he could definitely go to prison for that, and I would have the legal right to sue him to retain or to recover any losses that I faced because of that transaction. So I guess it's safe to say you definitely do want to trust your trustee. You don't want to just pick any old person. So sometimes family members may be a good choice because they love you, but they could also be a bad choice if they don't own any assets and there's really no teeth to be able to, or no assets to be able to recover if they did do you harm. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
rare in this situation, but it is a valuable point that you do need to place some trust in your trustee. That's why some people use attorneys or other professionals, because they know or they believe that those people have a lot to lose if they were to do something improper, not only their license, but also perhaps assets of their own.
Do you find that these types of tools are either used often or are more complicated than the benefits that they provide, even though this is something that's available? Do you find they're being used a lot, or only people that really look, I'm a lawyer that stirs the pot a lot of times, and I could get sued or I could get harassed. And so therefore I want to set up something that makes me a little bit more incognito, if you will, for financial and just harassment. You mentioned before, like you win a lottery, you want to go incognito, right? You don't want a lot of people searching you out. Well, maybe you go ahead and sell your property, start a family, land trust, and then, buy another property, and it helps a lot. I mean, is this something that people that have a reason, and that most people typically, it's just, it's a neat tool, but it's not practical for most people.
Right. I don't think it's very complex, so I don't think it's necessarily an issue of practicality, but I will say they're not very common. I think mostly because people don't know about them at all. Although they are more common for people that are actively thinking about, man, I don't want people to be able to search for all these rentals that I own. Or like you said, I won the lottery. People are going to be trying to figure out where I live, try to get things from me, maybe try to sue me, or doctors or professionals or anybody that has either a substantial amount of savings and they're worried about either nuisance lawsuits, or people just trying to find them for whatever reason. Those are all valid uses for this type of trust. Again, it's not as common as a regular revocable trust for avoiding probate, making sure assets go to your loved ones when you pass away without court and expenses. But it probably is a tool that many more people would use if they knew about it and really understood that it doesn't really change your daily life that much, and does provide a pretty good mask over what you actually own. So it is an interesting tool, maybe not for everybody, but something that I really would like people to know exists and have kind of in their tool bag, so to speak.
Well, I mean, this is really intriguing, and I know that I think it's like you just said, something people should know about, and they should inquire and understand this. I know I kind of asked some questions that kind of appeal to me, or what I would think about it. We've got a couple minutes left here before we kind of have to close out this discussion. And is there anything else that you would like to add, or maybe convey, or maybe use examples that we didn't really touch on here that you would like to kind of leave everybody with?
Well, just as a brief summary first, this is all about providing privacy. Some people value privacy more than others, so of course that's going to be a factor to weigh. You do want to try to think about this before buying the property to get the maximum benefit of it. And third, if you're truly wanting to provide real asset protection, you wouldn't just create this trust. You'd want to pair it with an LLC or some other type of corporation, which provides under law segregation of liability and limitation of liability. So those are three main points from today. There's nothing else necessarily I would mention, although just like everything else in estate planning, you can't figure out what's best for you until you know what's out there. So that was one of the reasons for presenting on this today, just so people know that it's out there. It's something that can benefit people that have certain wishes. And so thank you all for joining. And I hope that this helps you think about some other planning strategies that might help you make a plan that really meets all your wishes and goals.
Well, thanks, Russ. Obviously, as a financial advisor, we always talk about we need to look at your finances in a common, how they interact with each other, and how they, different benefits of either retirement plans or brokerage accounts or savings accounts and insurances and, investment accounts and all those things. And what I love about what you bring to the table is you have to see these in a lot of different lights, whether it's for privacy or whether it's for, limited liability, or whether it's for, how your family needs to interact with whatever these properties are, and, probate and all these different things. And so they all play a part, and you bring a lot of great pieces to the table. And I want people to view a lot of this stuff as a holistic and how they work together. And you don't want them blocking each other, because we got to deal with wills and trusts and ownership and beneficiaries and probate. And so there's a lot to it, and you need somebody to work with you to bring these together. And I appreciate you shedding some light on that. And I hope our listeners really have a good understanding as to, maybe you don't understand all the pieces, but understand the value of certain concepts and the value of bringing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great summary.
So thank you very much. For everybody that's listening, the daily live stream, Russ is with us every week, and he also once in a while does the live stream. The live stream Financial Wellness Friday lectures. So make sure you take a look at the calendar. Make sure you take a look at Russ's information. And thank you so much. And we'll be seeing you next week, I'm sure. And hopefully we'll see everybody on Monday. Thank you so much, Russ.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you, and talk to everybody soon.